Hey everyone, welcome back this week. It's been kind of an exciting yet not exciting week for me. So this is going up the week of July 4th, really. So I spent July 4th as an American in London in self isolation because the app here, the NHS app, the National Health Service app, if you have it on and have contact tracing on, which I do because I think the data is important to help the government manage things and what's going on. But if you have the app on and you check into a venue and then you're within 6 feet or 2 meters of someone for 15 minutes who then later tests for COVID, and that person then reports that they have COVID to the app and says they want to share with their contacts anonymously, well, if that happened, you're getting a ping. So I got a ping, so I was told to isolate for 7 days. I was pretty mad about it until for a minute. And then I said, you know what, this is what we're supposed to do. And I don't really think the rule is necessarily logical, but it is changing in August. So I was happy to do it in that sense. And I actually ordered groceries and cooked some really good food and just took time to do some editing and do some work. And it was all right. So I feel like that was the best way to handle it, was just that it's something I can't change and just move forward. I've gotten in a few conversations recently where I feel like I've been baited into discussing things with anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers, and I don't get it. I don't understand the people who say if you wear a mask, it doesn't help prevent someone else from getting your germs, because it's like if I spit on someone with a mask on, it's not going to go outside the mask. But if I spit without a mask, it will go somewhere. So I don't understand the logic, but I was told it was sad that people wear masks, and I think it's sad people don't. So people are using their platforms however they want. I'm using my platform for this. I think the person I interviewed this week will understand it. Chantel Prat. She's awesome. She's someone I heard about well before I met her, because a lot of my friends that I met at my first job were friends with her in college, and we all went to the same college, but they graduated a couple years before me, and she's a neuroscientist and just super cool. Like, I loved chatting with her. I loved knowing more about her work, and she's someone who's written a book, and she just finished it, and it was really cool to see that, because it's a lot of work for anyone, and she's writing a nonfiction, which is really tough, and trying to explain difficult concepts to people who wouldn't have studied them for years or normally understand them. So that's who my guest is. Sorry about the rant about masks. I don't even think it was that much of a rant, to be honest. I'm inspired by Mark Maron this week. I love that guy says whatever he wants to say. And I feel like it's important that we just keep doing the thing that will be the best for everyone. So please stay safe. Things are starting to open up in London. They're starting to open up everywhere if they haven't already. And I just really want as many people as I know to stay safe. And really, generally, I think any numbers staying even or getting lower is better at this point. But I just hope that everyone's well, that people had good holidays, and that they're enjoying the summer safely. So let's go ahead and start the pod. Welcome to More Than Work, the podcast reminding you that your self-worth is defined by more than your job title. I'm Rabia, an IT project manager, comedian, nonprofit volunteer, and sometimes activist. Every week, I'll chat with a guest about pursuing passions outside of work or creating meaningful opportunities inside the workplace. As you listen, I hope you'll be inspired to do the same. Here we go. Welcome back, everyone. So today I have Chantel Prat. She's a professor of psychology and neuroscience at the University of Washington. I could have added a doctor before her title, but she's not pretentious, so we're not going to do that. But she is also what you'd call a doctor. She has a PhD. So how are you doing, Chantel?
Thank you so much for not adding the doctor. I usually tell people I prefer Chantel because as a first gen student, when people call me Dr. Pratt in my family, they're almost always making fun of me. So it's still, I just got promoted to full professor. I've been doing this for, 12 years at this place, but still Dr. Pratt seems like ironic. So you hit the nail on the head there. I'm glad that you don't see me as pretentious. Anyway.
No, I don't. I don't think so. So you've been at the University of Washington. Wow, that was usually not that hard to say. For 12 years then, you said.
I think so. I think this is we lost a year. So there's that squishy year where I think it's 12 years. It could be 11 or 13. Let's say 12 years plus or minus 1 year. That would be very accurate. Yeah, I've been here for a while. And fun fact, University of Washington is the university that's in Washington, unlike Washington University, which is somewhere in the middle of the States.
That's in St. Louis, actually. Yeah. I applied there. Yeah. A long time ago. I always tell
people the University of Washington that's in Washington to help them.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So you're officially a professor. Before, were you like an associate professor, or how's that path work?
Yeah, I guess I'm officially not until September, but I'm trying it on for size. Associate professor doesn't really roll off the tongue that much.
No. And the abbreviation of associate professor, it's like, I don't know.
And before that.
Yeah, or it could be ask professor. I don't know. So I'll put the explicit rating on this one because of me. But no, that's really awesome. So how did you end up, and I kind of know part of your story just because you were roommates and best friends with some of my best friends in college, but how did you get into academia? Like, how did you end up just staying with that? You said you're a first generation college student. Same here. I definitely stopped school at some point, but
I think that the short answer is I got fascinated with the brain, and it was kind of late-ish, about my junior year, between my sophomore and junior year in college. I started out pre-med, literally like first couple of years of college, as our joint friends know, was not really about college for me. It was a lot about figuring out how to be an individual. And I was pre-med mostly because I knew I was smart, had a lot of feedback from the world that I was smart. And like, smart people go to med school.
Yeah.
And in the middle of an accelerated pre-med program, I had to take one social science class, and I learned about the Phineas Gage story and this guy who got a railroad spike through the front of his head, and how he kind of became really crass, kind of like went from being an upstanding citizen to kind of behaving like more like me all the time, a little mildly to moderately inappropriate, and, couldn't kind of stick with the plan. And it just hit me that, I'd been studying all these organs, but there's an organ between our ears that makes us us. And that was just like, for me, it was kind of game over. I mean, there was a lot of in between things, like the fact that I was a single mom in undergrad and needed a job, and found a job looking for people who wanted experience with kids. And it was a neuroscience lab, and they were studying how baby brains changed as they learned language. And so it was just like, I was already interested in neuroscience. I was qualified for this particular job because I could actually entertain a baby. We had a science trivia the other day in the lab. And that was one of the questions, like, what special skill got Chantel into neuroscience? And it was actually that I did puppet shows for the kids.
Wow.
So like, once you get the cap on them, they need to be, probably the most difficult job I've ever done in neuroscience, because you need to get a baby. First of all, babies are out of control. You need to get a baby to be like sitting still and paying attention, but not like so excited that they're screaming or moving around or waving their hand, and not like scared or bored. Like you just need to get them in this optimal zone. So I think developed my interest in individual differences, because you had to be able to tell right away, like, how much energy do I bring it to this baby to get them in the zone, And along the way, I just learned more and more about brain and cognition, and how different, we were studying like, oh, what does a 6-month-old look like? What does a 12-month-old look like? What does a 20-month-old look like? And I was always like, whoa, they look really different. The 6-month-old looks really different from one another. And that part of it always kind of captivated me. And so I think, part of it is like luck, and part of it is just me, I think, feeling empowered to move towards things that felt good. Like once I had that aha moment, like, and I was young, I was 19. When I switched from like almost being done with all my classes for pre-med to being really interested in the brain and the human brain. And when I sort of realized, like, what am I doing here? I'm going to be in debt. I don't like blood. No one should ever trust me with their lives. Like when I got blown away by the brain, I think I sort of started giving myself permission to follow things that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And from then on, it was just like, I'm going to keep moving towards things that feel good.
That's really cool, because I think too, probably being first generation in college, and also we grew up at a time, and I feel like it's a little bit less now, where you were a doctor or a lawyer. Like I wanted to be a lawyer. So we have two first gens here, one that wanted to be a doctor, one that wanted to be a lawyer, because that's what we were told was the successful path. And it's just, yeah.
We inherited that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just what we were told. So it's really cool you figured out what you wanted to do. So when you say the brains look different, it's just from all the scans you're doing, and like, what are you seeing that's really easy for someone to understand, I guess?
So when I was a youngster in the lab, I was really captivated by how different the babies behaved.
Okay.
And how different what they could do was, especially at these kind of pivotal, when they start to learn a language, some talk a lot and some aren't talking at all. And then I was also analyzing, at that point, I was reading brainwaves. So as you can actually record the electrical activity outside of the head, that's like millions and millions of neurons working underneath there. Huh. And one great thing about babies, they have thin scalps and big brains. So their signals come through really nicely if they're not laughing or squirming or doing other inconvenient baby things. But so I also got to see sort of how the organization of these electrical impulses, these responses to things like words or pictures on the screen, depending on how old they were, sounds, changed, and when they changed at different points, depending on what the babies could do. So now in the lab, I kind of use all of the different toys that you can use to figure out how people's brains work. I guess I would say my main interest is understanding the relationship between brain and behavior, but in the level of an individual. So I think something that makes my work unique is that brains are really complicated. And so most neuroscience research looks at average. They take a group of 20 and they say, this is, you average them and you say, this is how brains work. And it's totally unsatisfying and problematic, not only because we're not looking at average brains, we're looking at white undergraduate from, college students, mostly monolingual English speaking brains. We're going, this is how brains work. And also because sometimes, and this is what I found out really in my dissertation, like sometimes if you take an average and there are 2 or 3 ways to do something, that average doesn't actually explain anybody.
Yeah.
So I use magnetic resonance imaging, which I know you and I have talked about, like how we use it for health and how we use it for research. And that really that will let you look at a brain structure really closely, or actually let you watch which parts of the brain are using a lot of oxygen and see like what part of this brain is working as this person does a task. I use EEG, I record brain signals on top of the head, and that doesn't really tell you where, but it tells you with like a millisecond precision when a brain is working harder. We use something called transcranial magnetic stimulation, which actually takes advantage of the fact that if a magnetic field rises and falls really quickly, it creates an electrical current. And this lets us stimulate a brain it goes right through the scalp. So it lets us excite a brain, kind of like a reflex. We can tickle different parts of the brain and see what happens. We can fatigue it. So if you stimulate it over and over once a second for like 5 minutes, you get something not as strong, but kind of like back in the day when there used to be flash bulbs and you would have a blind spot in your eye for a minute, just because that part of the brain that's processing vision ran out of neurotransmitter. It gets tired. And so you can kind of disrupt or excite or fatigue different parts of the brain, and then not only test what's lighting up, but is it important? Is it necessary? What job is that thing doing? So I've done some studies with patients too, but I kind of like to use all of the tools to figure out how different mechanisms or how different ways that people's brains work relate to how they process information, and in what situations they'll thrive and in what situations they'll struggle.
how did you evolve into that study of the individual versus going into the pursuit that you mentioned where it's just kind of averaging things and kind of coming to conclusions?
It's so interesting. I think part of me thinks I've always been captivated by that. So when you asked that question, I was taken back to a time that I gave a job talk, and the job talk, I was invited to, apply for this job. And the person who invited me was actually one of my previous research mentors. And she was like, basically like, Chantel does all of these things. Like, I don't even know how to describe what she does. And I was like, wow, that's a really flattering introduction, but not really. I think I've always been interested in this, even from the time I was looking at babies. I was like, is it experience? Is it the way their brains work? Do people talk to them more? Like, what is driving these individual differences? And when I was in that lab, before I even started graduate school, I was part of a study where we trained babies. We gave them new words and these weird, like we use parts of horse bits and things that we were pretty sure a baby hadn't seen. And we're like, look at the wug. So we tried to control for experience and watch the way different brains learned. I think most psychologists and most probably, it's particularly true of psychologists, most of us are doing me search of some kind, right? And I think I'm pretty weird. I think I probably spent my first 20 years of life trying to fit in, and then the next 20 plus just embracing, oh, how am I weird? Like, what made me that way? And I think, that's probably part of it. But I also think I'm really probably bigger part of it is that I'm really lucky, like coming from, my dad was a bricklayer and my mom started out as like an administrative assistant, worked her way up to a really important managerial job in a company. But I have a breadth of experience with different kinds of people. And I'm really thankful for that. When they say, how many people do you hang out with that don't have a college degree? Like plenty, you know what I mean? So yeah. I think the fact that I have, friends that are MacArthur Genius Award winners and friends that are preschool teachers, and they're all really amazing and brilliant and in different ways. And so this one size fits all neuroscience didn't match my experiences. I think also like in this particular climate, as we, are going through the 1 year anniversary of George Floyd's murder and all of this stuff, I think people have a hard time. I think there's a reason that we do the one size fits all. And one is that people misuse differences. And I think that there's like a predisposition to believe that different means I'm better than you, and not just different means different. And that's not the case in the brain. There are a lot of design choices that a brain makes that makes you better in one situation and worse in another, but not better or worse overall. So I think that we need to be responsible in talking about differences, but I also think everyone needs to stretch a little bit and understand complexity, and that it's not unidimensional. We're not getting into a line like your brain is better than my brain is better than their brain. It's like there are differences and they're beautiful and interesting. And we need, if we're going to have models of how brains work that can help lots of different kinds of people, we need to embrace that complexity and try and understand it.
That makes a lot of sense. And just kind of one thing that's cool is you realizing how each individual is different, but from a different perspective. Like there's the sayings like, oh, each person's unique, that you get told when you're a kid. And you're kind of, but there's also the truth of that. Did this understanding of the brain in this different level, and also becoming a mother pretty young and then working your way through. And I want to acknowledge that you went through college, working, and with a kid, and who's an extraordinary kid too, not just like, just some regular kid, but she is. I mean, she's really, I think she could definitely has a more education than I do at this point from that perspective for sure. But, did it change how you parented and how you thought of yourself and your ability to even do that? Because that's hard.
That's such a good question. I think, well, let's give credit to Jasmine. She is an exceptional kid, and she had a very even temperament, which helped a lot. I think the truth is I was a parent before I was a scientist, and I'm really thankful for that, actually, because I have seen a lot of psychologists raise children, and I asked a lot of questions about, I think that the more you know, the more anxious you become. And like, there's, we were talking about inheriting ideas about what's good, right? And so the ideas about what good parenting means changes from culture to culture and from, generation to generation. And in a lot of ways, I'm really thankful that I was young and frankly stupid when I had Jasmine, because I used my instincts. And just like, again, in parenting, I moved towards what felt good. And like, I had a lot of, I didn't have a lot of knowledge on board to make me afraid of things. And I had a lot of instincts on board and just sort of, I guess, relationship skills. So yeah, if I had a kid right now, I'm sure it would be a disaster because I would be so freaked out about all of the different ways that, I had a very clear focus with Jasmine, and that was like, don't mess her up. She's perfect. And I did pretty good there, I think. Medium good. Depends on if you ask me or Jasmine. In terms of it being hard, I think, I remember my stepdad telling me something like, I'm not worried about you because you have a burning desire to succeed. And that didn't feel right. I don't feel like I'm ambitious or my goal is to succeed. I think what feels right to me is that I didn't consider failure to be an option. I didn't think about like, this is hard. What if I don't make it? I was just like, this is my life, next step. Kind of, and I don't know what that is. I think the word that I feel more aligned with is stubborn. It's like, okay, well, now I'm pregnant. Well, shit, things are going to change, but it's going to be different, not necessarily better or worse. And certainly, I think that like parenting is an excellent example of like things where you have like now I have to make a plan to take a shower, and that freaking sucks. But now I have a really big mission for I'm a model for somebody else. And I want to follow my dream and teach my daughter that she matters and that her career matters and that her passions matter. And that was like incredibly motivating. So, different.
Yeah, totally.
Not necessarily better or worse.
No, that's awesome. And it's a good way to look at it. I think because people have different experiences. Like, I don't have kids and I don't believe I'm going to, but that's a decision at some point. And then other people have kids when they're older and some when they're younger, and it can happen at different times. I can see how having kids when you're older would make you more paranoid because you do know more stuff, and you've given advice too. So I'm sure some of that's coming back to you. Like, I've given people advice. I had a Mother's Day special, with some of your friends actually. And it was like, I've given you guys advice. I've not, but you know what? You listened, and that's too bad. I'm not a parent, but I'm sure if I had a kid, it would all come back to me like, probably wasn't the best shout,
Well, I mean, one thing that I know is true is that this is true in parenting. I only had one kid, but I did have a foster kid for a little while, who's my niece. And I have grad students who are like big kids, you spend 5 years of your life raising them. And I don't think it's a one size fits all there either. I mean, I think that some things that work great with one, you're like, I'm winning at parenting. Like, look at me, I'm the mentor of the year. And then it's like, next person, like, no.
Then like, you
it
sure
wasn't me, it was
not
them.
An option? Exactly.
Yeah, like Jasmine walked in the door, successful human. I just had to get out of her way. It definitely was like, not a lot.
Yeah. So with the TMS, now, was that also part of like a Black Mirror episode?
Yeah. Okay. So like 95% of what I do in my life is studying individual people and how brains work. But there was this 5% of my life that I got famous and infamous for. And that is that I use that tool, which, I was part of a team that put two tools together. One that you can use to stimulate a person's brain, and another technology that's existed since before I was in graduate school, where you can read a person's brain and use it it's a brain computer interface. You can use it to move a cursor on your mouse, or most recently they're using it to like type, right? I don't know if you guys saw that on the news, but you can read brainwaves and decode the signals and use it to create some effect on a machine. So we stuck those things together and actually linked. I was the first person in the world to link two human brains together. One was my husband's and one was my colleague Rajesh Rao in computer science. So we did the first brain-to-brain interface in which Rajesh played a video game using my husband's brain as basically a very high-quality Wiimote, So Andrea was under the TMS coil, which was over his motor cortex, and his hand was over a joystick button. And Rajesh was watching the video game and thinking, like, there's a plane flying down over or a missile or something, and you have to shoot the missile and not shoot the plane. So when he would think about moving his hand, it would trigger the computer to send the signal across the internet and move Andrea's hand. So we started that. And then I know you're shaking your head.
Well, I'm shaking my, so just for the record, I'm shaking my head. I'm also thinking, man, what if your Wi-Fi goes out or something? Like, what happens?
Game over.
Game over.
Game over. And that, it was a cool technique. And it was, we went on to do another thing that got a lot of media, which was the social network, where we had 3 people playing Tetris with their brains.
Amazing.
So 2 people would be saying, like, rotate, don't rotate. We added noise to one person so that the interpreter would have, their brain would sort of merge the signals and be like, who am I going to listen to when they were inconsistent? And so we hooked 3 people together to play a game of Tetris. At the end of the day, it's a very inefficient way to play Tetris. But you can say you did it. And my piece on that was really, like, my involvement in that was really like, if we have really good tools for decoding signals from somebody's brain, our TMS, the thing that you use to excite the brain, is much less refined. I don't think in my lifetime, we'll be able to put like an idea in someone's head. It's very much like you're exciting a huge piece of cortex, a millimeter, which is like millions and millions and millions of neurons. And I can make your finger twitch, but I can't make you think of an apple. I might, do a little trick to make like you think of a verb that uses fingers more than a verb that uses feet or something like that. But my piece on that was really the fact that if you're going to translate information from one mind to another, you need to know the codes that each mind uses, right? So all of your tools need to be fine-tuned for that person and then kind of translated into the next person. So that was my role on the team. But yes, that's what got me a little gig in the I Am Human documentary, which is all about brain, interfacing technologies and the ethics, of course, and the possible benefits for people with Parkinson's or tetraplegics and things like that. And yeah, it got me a lot of also people who are very concerned about me doing evil science or reading their minds or stuff like that. And rightfully so, I understand that people are concerned about privacy and going back to the idea that your brain makes you, right? Like there are some really interesting ethical things you can get into, like your brain makes you, Rabia. And if you sign up for the study and I stimulate your brain, I'm changing you.
Yeah.
Like, what if you, after I changed you, didn't want to do that? What have we done? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of really interesting things around there. But I will say, for anyone who is listening to this and is secretly worried that people are trying to control their minds, there's no way anyone could use this technology without your consent. Like, you have to be there, be still to the millimeter perception. And then, you might say, well, what if somebody forced me at gunpoint to sit still for this study? And I was like, well, it'd probably be easier just to force you at gunpoint to do whatever they want you to do, because all I'm going to be able to do at the end of the day is make your finger twitch. So I understand people being freaked out about that. I don't mean to joke about it, but I also, for that reason, want to say there's no way that somebody could, I don't know, make you cheat on your husband or something with brain computer interfaces or your math test or whatever.
So also, if you hear that excuse from your partner,
exactly,
it's not true.
A no. It's a total no. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't get ideas. Anyone listening, any adulterers listening, please don't get ideas about using this as a way of justifying it.
Chantel Prat made me do it. It's never. Sometimes it's right, but not in this case.
She made you move your finger, but you did the rest. Yeah,
that's right.
So everything else was you, buddy, or lady, whoever you are.
It's so funny. whole new realm of trouble. That's great.
Yeah. So with the documentary too, if you want to talk a little bit about that, I mean, what's that experience been like in getting into media? Because then I want to lead to your book, but you've done different stuff in media. So what was the experience like of doing a documentary and being involved in that?
The documentary was amazing. I think from beginning to end, the idea really evolved around what it was, the message that they were trying to communicate. And one thing to point out is that both directors of that film are women and young women and badass women who I really, really, I mean, I'm amazed by, and just like watching how they take this subject that could be scary or very cerebral and made it very, they humanized it, right? I am human.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, not like, let's talk about Neuralink and like what Elon Musk is going to do to pigs or whatever, but like, let's talk about real people and how this has changed their lives and what their decision process was like, and what research is like, and what we can do and what we can't do. And also, I think, they talked really intelligently about the ethical concerns and how this is something that people need to be deciding now. We don't want it to be like social media where we're like, it's like the thing is out of the gate. It's like, disaster. And now we're like, how do we regulate this? I mean, if people are going to have headsets at home that they use to play their video games with, or to imagine if you could augment your telephone calls with some kind of signal that tells you like whether the person on the other side is like excited or bored or whatever, like, I imagine that, I mean, I know because I'm here in Seattle with all these tech companies that everybody in the world is working on different ways to listen to the brain and use it to inform their technology. So how do we regulate that? How do we, protect the thing that is most fundamentally making us us?
I was thinking about, because you mentioned Parkinson's, and I was thinking about ALS too, which I know are two different diseases, but like there's the idea of people losing their ability to communicate, and it's not like they stopped thinking. I mean, I had a friend who went through that. It's like they just can't speak anymore and can't write and stuff. And so the potential for allowing people to communicate for longer and those kind of things is really good.
That's right. Yeah. And I think there are also things that are, I think you're right. And I think communication is so important, and we take it for granted. But, when I was thinking about this brain to brain thing, I thought like how many big technological human advances are centered around our ability to communicate, from like the telegraph, the telephone, the cell phone, the internet. But all of these things rely on symbolic communication. They all rely on our ability to, use words or graphics or something like that. But like, what about the stuff that you can't really describe really well? What about this? I mean, I think like being able to communicate, period, is really important. But like, what about the soup that communication is in, right? Like, what about the feeling behind the words? Or what about people who suck at picking the right words, or just suck at picking, like understanding how someone else will interpret that word and adjusting it accordingly? I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity for neural engineering to help with a lot of things, help directly affect all of the neurodegenerative, problems, but also mood and everything like that. But I think that the opportunity to enhance communication is exciting, but also scary too. Like, I think, would you want someone to be like, what if you could have like a billboard, like, you want to be able to turn it off. Like, I want the opportunity to share that private soup, the space in which those words are coming through, but I definitely want to turn it off.
Well, it's like those movies, like What Women Want, and then there's the new, I guess What Men Want was the other one, where the lady or the guy can hear what all the women or all the men are thinking. And it's like, at some point you wouldn't, you want your thoughts, your private thoughts kept private from people, even outside of a romantic comedy, like you just do.
Totally. And the first person to get it's going to be the person who puts the ads on your phone. So, right?
Well, yeah, it's already true. If we talk about a product, we will see an ad for it. So now it's like, oh, I was only thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's so crazy. So yeah, it's good that the ethics comes up. I was talking to this one woman I met who works in AI, but she specifically works in ethics on AI. And I thought that was interesting too, just because, I mean, even look at right now, I don't want to get too much into it, but like all the conspiracy theories just about the vaccine and stuff. And it's just like, dude, but then I can see if they were saying something about other things, maybe it's more like you're not worried about the fact that you were served all the videos about those conspiracy theories because of an algorithm, but you're just concerned about the vaccine. Why don't you be concerned about YouTube? Like maybe just it's a suggestion because there's all these ways that the data is being used now, and everyone that I know in technology is some form of AI, and this is just like a next level. There's a siren going by.
I know. I was taking that as a sign that what you were saying was really important.
No,
like you're under arrest, YouTube.
No, I know. Yeah, exactly. The police. Well, it's like I live in Camden, so that's what happens. So that's really awesome that you were involved in that, and you've just done this work. Because it is fascinating. I mean, it's scary to me, but it's fascinating. I have MS, so I've spent a lot of time in MRIs, and I've also spent a lot of time thinking about what if I can't. For me, it's mostly mobility I worry about, but I have thought about those things otherwise too, about just communicating and those kind of things. And then I've just become more aware during the pandemic too of accessibility issues because I do comedy. And so a lot of shows were online, and this made it easy for people to attend, people who couldn't get to places before. And then Zoom kept adding features, and they added closed captioning because I never would have thought about, people can't hear, so Zoom's hard for them to participate on. And then there's an app called Clubhouse where you have to only listen. So people who, again, can't hear can't participate. So to me, it's really fascinating that just the idea that there are things that can help people with that kind of thing, and people are working on them,
Yeah. It's working on them quickly. Yeah, that's right. I guess most technologies have a double side, like we're talking about the internet, right? But the goal should always be, or at least when we're doing human research, we have to demonstrate that the potential to help is greater than the potential to harm. And I think I read part of the Dalai Lama's book, The Universe in a Single Atom, and it blew me away because he was talking about science and religion and how the Dalai Lama is a big fan of physics and neuroscience. And I know people who have gone out to meet with him. And pre-COVID, he used to have these annual conferences where he would just talk to scientists, physicists and neuroscientists and everyone else. And in his book, it started by saying, if science proves the principles of my religion to be false, I would change my beliefs. And I thought, that surprised me. That was the first part of this. And the second piece was, but I think scientists have an ethical, nobody is really holding the responsibility for what it is that people do with what they have done. So the flip side of that is that scientists need to be ethical and make sure somebody needs to build the bridge between what we learn and how it's implemented in the world, because there's this huge gap between research and helping, I think. And I thought that, when I said people use differences research inappropriately and harmfully, but I don't think that should make us afraid to do it. We need to do it. We need to build representative models that help lots of different kinds of people, but we need to do it responsibly. That's it. Right. So I think this is all the helping part is what we should keep in mind. We're trying to advance the human condition and the world, not just humans. Humans are kind of advancing a lot.
So one thing I know we can't get into a ton, but you're writing a book, and writing a book is a rite of passage for many people for many different things. So yeah, and it's exhausting apparently.
Oh my gosh, right now I was thinking about this. I was I have 2 full-time jobs right now, and it feels like I'm dating 2 people. So when something is irritating me about one, I can fall into the other, and that's really great. I don't know. I've never dated 2 people, no judgment about that, but this is how I imagine it would be. One person, things are good here, I go bad, I go over here. But when things are going well for both of them, you're just I ain't got time for this.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at right now. So I'm 3 weeks away from final book deadline. I'm so excited. It's called The Neuroscience of You. So I think this is it was a passion project that the inspiration for it came when Donald Trump was elected president, because I saw how many people who before that could totally talk to each other and stopped. I just saw a lot of disillusion of relationships. And I realized that when my husband, who's also in the same field, and I would talk about these things, that I had this kind of secret power for understanding differences and for communicating through differences. Yeah. And so that was kind of the inspiration. And I was really, really lucky to have people pick up on this idea that neuroscience isn't a one size fits all field. And this is about how to figure out, talking about some of these different design choices the brain makes and how people can figure out, try and reverse engineer their own brains and brains of other people who they might be close to or far away from, and try and figure out, why are they like that? Why am I like this?
Yeah.
And I think like one of the things that I love about your podcast and this idea that, it's more than just work, it's about what lights you up in that realm. What I really have learned about this writing a book, like my agent, whose job it is to support me through this process, told me writing a book is like jumping off a building without a parachute. I would never do it. And I'm like, what? You're supposed to be talking me into this. It's motivational. But she's not wrong, because it's a whole new world. And I think what I have, like, the number one thing I have learned is that I cannot be creative when I'm stressed. And I can write a grant, which is what I'm doing right now. I can write a grant under incredible pressure, or a paper. I can talk about science. I can say smart things, but I can't say them in a way that can, like, the goal of the book is to write something that's truer than average, but also more relatable than average. My target audience is not academics. My target audience is the people who I'm surrounded with in my life, real people, so trying to break these complex ideas into things that are digestible and interesting, and doing that under stress, it's a no-go.
Yeah.
It is impossible. But at the same time, when I get sucked into my book, it'll be like, that's my first real experience of flow. I heard people talking about being in the flow, and I was like, but I can get into the book and I can just, hours can go by. And I'm like, crap, day job, other partners calling me, this is BS. But it's been, if I make it through, which I will, I'm at the end here. I think it's been like the best thing I can say is that I'm 46 years old. And I think I've been successful in a lot of domains, but this, really, really, really stretched me in a way I couldn't have possibly imagined. And it was awesome because, sometimes you kind of feel like, okay, well, I've made it, or I'm here, or whatever. Like, I've done all the really scary things, or I don't know, but I haven't.
Now you're writing a book.
This. Yeah. I know. And I guess, like, I would just also say, I don't recommend doing it during a global pandemic. If for the first time, like, if you have a choice, but it's fine. Everything is fine.
Did you do new research for it, or are you just aggregating things you knew?
Some of it. Oh no, I learned so much. Like, I would say one of the things that happened too late in the game is that eventually I started to, like, I had this plan and I had, a book proposal and chapters and things that I wanted to cover. Most of them were outside of my not most, like many of them were outside of my expertise. And I was really, really trying to stick to the plan. But as I got into it, certain parts would grow and, other parts would shrink. And those parts that grow are things either that I know about or that I think about a lot, and they became bigger, like connecting and language and how, those things are different, how important they are and how the brain makes you good or bad at it. But I had to learn a lot. Like, it starts from the chemical level, which is not something I study, and goes all the way up to, like, how two brains try and connect to one another. The chemical chapter so far is called mixology, which
That's cool.
talks about your ingredients of your neural cocktail.
That's going to be really cool. Cause I mean, just having, and we've chatted a little bit about MRIs before, just on Facebook, I guess, but like just having been in an MRI so many times and having different, everyone gets blood taken or other stuff. It's fascinating to me. I don't like looking at the MRI of my brain, first of all. And I don't know if that's like, maybe you would know. Is that normal? It freaks me out to see my brain. And I'm almost like, because my brain is looking at itself. And maybe that's.
Oh, that's so cool. I love it. I was really freaked out to look at my brain because when I was younger, I had the stomach for it. I read a lot of Stephen King novels. And there's this one of his novels is called, I think it's called The Dark Half. And it's about a guy, spoiler alert, if you want to read this book, who, like, absorbed a twin. It was an absorbed twin, which really happens. And he's, like, having all these headaches.
It really happens in real life? A twin can absorb a twin?
Yeah, like one twin will absorb another twin. Yeah. But in this book, like, the guy's having headaches and he's also having these, like, inclinations to do things. But he goes and has a brain scan. That's a long story long. And there is a freaking eyeball inside his brain that's like blinking and like parts of teeth. And that's how he finds out. I don't think any of it's possible.
I don't think so. It would take a lot. It would have to develop a lot. Now I'm like freaked out. Can you imagine the dentist? 100. Open your mouth. No, you're going to have to go inside my brain. Actually, it's those teeth.
I have a brain tooth cavity. So I told somebody about this when I didn't get my first brain scan until I was at Carnegie Mellon learning how to do that as a postdoc. And I guess I had like mentioned this casually over beers like years before I got into the scanner. And one of my friends, this is such a jerky thing to do, sent me an email that says incidental finding, which of course is like a heart-wrenching thing after my scan, and literally had photoshopped parts of eyeballs. She took my brain and like photoshopped pieces of eyeballs. It was, obviously I knew at that point it was a joke, but I was like, so that's my story of being afraid to look at brains. But I imagine your experience is based on like, how am I doing?
But no, I mean, I'm ridiculous about it. Like, because I even told the doctor one day, I was like, I don't want to look at it. And she goes, what? And I go, I don't want to, she goes, let me show you. And I go, no, I don't like to look at the brain. And I said, I can look at the spine. And she just kind of didn't really have much patience for me. I'm like, what? What? The 80-year-olds are more fun? Sorry.
So you feel like you're naked or something? Like you're seeing yourself?
Like, I don't like seeing it. Because when they move it, like when they move the scan, so you see it all moving, and I'm like,
scan it through.
I don't know what's going on, and I don't, because I think it's really cool that the MRI can see so much, but it does freak me out, because I'm just like, whoa, it's a lot.
Would you like to look at someone else's brain?
I think it wouldn't bother me.
Or do you just think the brain is like...
Maybe my brain recognizes, maybe I would know. I wonder if I saw another brain, and this is really, there's no point to this part of the conversation, but people maybe will also have this same experience. But maybe I wonder if I would even recognize another brain. It's so weird.
I'm going to go with no.
Probably not.
I'm going to bet on no. But no, I think, remember, I do weird. That's my jam. Yeah. I think it's really fascinating. That's why I asked you.
Yeah, I just find it cringy. So...
It's like too vulnerable to see yourself all sliced up like that, right?
Exactly.
Like,
I mean, what we were just saying, it was weird, right? So
I really, really feel like your brain just cut off this conversation because it didn't want its secrets to be revealed.
Yes,
right now.
Yes. So just so listeners know, and I'm just going to leave this in now because we've already committed, but basically my internet connection just went down for a moment. So, all right. So I wanted to ask you too, because I mean, your job, you're just doing something you love, which is amazing. But then you also have a passion for horses, right? And that's like your thing.
I think so first, I think they're related. Of course, everything is related because it's me that's, the center of like what makes me interested in these things. But I think the horse is really, really, really good for me because their mental life is so different than ours, right? So people, and I had this aha moment that I'm going to share with the world. And if somebody gets rich and famous off of it, fine, because I think it's really important. One day I was, on a commute with my husband, and it just clicked with me that people have this probably unique ability to think about things that aren't right in front of them. Like we spend so much of our life mind wandering. We're thinking about what we're going to say next. We're, dreading what we already said or did, or like daydreaming about Jason Momoa or whatever, wherever your brain takes you. It's like, it's not like, I think more and more as we're on social media or as we're just like in our heads, our mental lives are more and more disconnected from the physical world around us. And horses aren't like that. So, and most animals, but horses are like these like 9 to 1,200 pound prey that are giant, and they're in your space, and they're really just trying to figure out if they're going to get eaten. So they're like paying attention to you and your body language. And, for me, that was this is one reason I have horses is that I show up at the end of a day and I'm like, oh, I'm stressed. I only have 15 minutes. I have to do this, this, and this. And I'd put my horse in the cross ties and they'd be like dancing around. And I'd be like, why today of all days? Why are you like this? And she's like, what the hell is going to eat us? Because I came in all stressed out. Right. So that's why. And so it's kind of like, oh, it's a
Hmm.
big mirror, and I'm like, okay, oh, you need to chill out. You need to breathe and, oh, this and that. But what I learned from the horse, like through this, so my last horse I owned for more than 15 years. And it was an off the track racehorse that was always ready to run away. That was
Hmm.
her sort of MO. So she really, 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 really taught me how much we influence each
Yeah.
other. And this was my aha moment, is that because we live inside our head, we're totally unaware of how we feel lonely, because that's like a private thing, right? But we're also like totally tuned out to how much we affect each
Hmm.
other. Like just our, whether it's verbal or nonverbal. I'm kind of hypersocial, so I'm like prone to like complimenting someone on their scarf on the bus or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
I'm that weird person. But then they're like so
Yeah.
happy, like, oh my god, you saw me. And sometimes people are like, why are you talking to me? I don't know you, and that's okay. But through my learnings with the horse, I just had this moment where I was like, oh my God, we are social animals. We are social primates. Our brains mirror that. We understand each other by like
Hmm.
mirroring what we would do. And yet we spend so much of our like conscious effort, like our mental worlds are so are so often detached from our surroundings, that we really don't understand how much your mood might be affected by the mood of someone else around you, or how much a
Hmm.
smile can,
Yeah.
just how much emotional contagion and how much social interactions are important. We just don't understand all the little ripples, right? So like at the end of the day, you might write a book, or you might be in a documentary, or you might just be a person who compliments people's scarf on the bus or whatever, but like we don't understand all the little
Yeah.
ripples that we create in the people around us. And I thought, whoa, that's really intense. So that's why I have horses. And dogs for different reasons, but like I feel that there's an honesty there and like an ability to connect that doesn't require words. And it's like, if you are behaving in a way that's like consistent, like if you're mad, then the horse will be like, what are you mad about? But they're fine. But if you're like trying to act calm, but your hands are in a fist and your shoulders are stuff, the horse will be like, there's something weird about this person,
Yeah.
that they don't like it. So it gives you a lot of feedback about like how you are
Huh.
and what kind of vibe you're putting off. And
Yeah. Well, so actually something I thought of earlier and then I forgot because we started talking about something else, but when you physically connect brains, right? Like through or
mm-hmm,
whatever, through hardware and yeah,
tools.
tools. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's signals being going through these tools and that's what's occurring. But as someone who's been called an empath and who's labeled myself that many times, then I think a horse would be similar, right? Is there a study of that or that aspect of things? And have you done that?
I haven't done that. I only study
Mm-hmm.
thinking. I think I get really squirmy in the feeling world. And I think it's because I read in my writing of the book, I read some research on empathy and empathy skills. I watch movies and I
Yeah.
sob. I feel like I see somebody getting hurt on a video and I'm like, that is not funny. It hurt. Like I feel like someone punched me, and I'm like,
I
Rabia, you're like,
I'm the
you think
worst
it's
because I
funny?
no, and it's been more than one guest has said they think falling videos are funny, and so yeah, I think it's funny sometimes, but not when someone gets like punched.
I do think it's funny too, but I think it would like there's like a fine line between when you think it's funny and when you're like, are they dead? Like
Yes,
some of those videos you're like, did that person
yeah,
die?
like America's Funniest Videos. Sometimes I would be like, I'm not enjoying this show. It's too.
Somebody flies up a rope swing like into a
Yeah,
wall or
that's
something. You're like, are you
yeah.
dead? Is your brain okay? But so I haven't done that research, but it's really interesting because people mean different things when they say
Hmm.
empathy, right? But Brene Brown says empathy
Yeah.
is feeling with. And that's what it looks like in the brain. Like they also call it emotional contagion. So if you're watching somebody experiencing some different kind of feeling, your brain will take on that
Mm.
feeling. So if it's like fear, then the amygdala will come on. If it's happy, like your dopamine centers will come on. And that is based on that basic premise of the social brain. When you watch someone, picking up a spoon, the part of your brain that picks up a spoon also
Oh,
activates. One of the only ways we can understand language is because there's all this mess in this acoustic
yeah.
signal. is that like my vowels are different than your vowels and all this stuff, but like your brain mimics like, oh, this person is, I'm hearing this stream, like how would I produce that stream? And there's like one-on-one production in your brain with sounds, or closer to a one-on-one production. So it like hears and then it models and it does. And so basically our brains have all these simulations going on, and feeling is one of them. It's like wild.
It's so cool
and great and beautiful. Yeah. It is, but isn't it weird? I think some of the things that we've talked about today, like when we went from like happy to noxious back to happy, is like some of the, again, like going like, how do you use this for the good or for the evil? A lot of like the problems with internet and stuff like that are leveraging our desire to connect. It's like going off of this human social brain and how we feel reward and, oh, somebody liked that. And, so it's like, it's like taking our biological desire to connect with one another. And then it's like using that to find pants for you or whatever, it's like, it's using that because it's highly addictive, because our brains are set up for that social interaction, but it doesn't quite give us certain things like eye contact and touch and things like that it's also kind of craving in those interactions.
Yeah, there's been a lot of like, well, they were talking about, having the endless scroll is really bad for people, and setting up some cues like, do you want to keep scrolling? And then I was learning a lot. I'm doing this public leadership credential at Harvard Kennedy, and like one of the things is that we did.
No big deal.
It's not a big deal. I mean, it's what I could afford of the options for grad school. But like, basically, I did this course about moral leadership, and one thing was around nudges and how nudges work and the social pressure around them, though, and stuff. And so it's all been really interesting, because you're right. Just that small awareness of one class gave me all this like, oh, I see what they're doing. I'm not going to. In the comments section, like, you have comments there because you want me to go in them, and then you want me to comment, and then you want me to buy this chocolate or whatever today, and it's just, it's really something. So, that's really cool. So is there anything that we didn't cover that you would want to cover?
I just wanted to say, I've told you this offline, but I'd like to tell your listeners that I think it's really important that you're doing this podcast. And I think, one of the things that scientists, we get trained to do science, but a lot of the important things we do, like science communication, mentoring, and so forth and so on, we get no training for. But I feel like it's a really important part of my job to mentor these young minds that are trying to figure out, do they want to be a doctor or a lawyer? Do they want to be a scientist? They're in this lab, but like, what are they going to do with that? And, I have no training, no formal training on that, but I always dream for them. I always say, like, my dream for you is that you'll have a job that you love, that you wake up and love to do. And I really like that, you also say, like, or can you find ways, it's like not everyone, most people work for money. And is there ways to find passion in that? Are there ways to find passion around it? And I just really appreciate that you had this idea and that you work so hard in your spare time to
thank
share.
you. Yeah. And I think it's becoming more apparent to me now. I'm just finding ways I can contribute to work that are aligned with my desire to write and do things. And I can help with that kind of stuff that they need, but also do my job. And I think, just you saying that gives me the opportunity to say that again, for people just to think about, if you're doing something that you're not necessarily driven by, maybe there are things within your organization you can still do, which is good. But well, thank you. I appreciate that. So I have a set of questions I ask every guest. And before that, I just like to ask, do you have any sort of, we always end up with like a lot of advice that people can pick out of an episode or a mantra or whatever, but do you have anything you want to share with listeners that's resonated with you lately, or maybe while you've been in this stress of book writing or something?
I guess I would just say, I think the biggest mistake we make when we're trying to understand each other is based on this social modeling that our brain does. And you put yourself in someone else's shoes is actually not all that good, because it's not you in their shoes, it's them in their shoes. And so I think that, like, instead of going like, why are they doing that? That's stupid, or that's bad decision making. Imagine that their brain is totally exactly as rational as your brain. None of them are logical. And then try and figure out, like, what are their values or their experiences, or how does their brain work that might lead them to behave that way, instead of like, oh, I wouldn't do that, that's wrong, or something like that. I think that, like, if everybody could get to that point where it's like, well, imagine what could be the circumstances that leads that person to make that choice, then maybe we would understand each other a little bit more, have a little bit more compassion for people who are different.
Yeah, that's really nice. Cool. All right. So the fun 5. And I think we're both wearing t-shirts today. People will see that in the photo that we take. But basically, can you talk about what's the oldest t-shirt you have and still wear?
The oldest t-shirt I have and still wear is Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles from Long Beach. Yeah.
Is that from college days or something?
Yeah.
Man, I mean, that's cool. That's great. Yeah.
It's got like, it's so thin and soft, and it's not really for public, but it's great. And it's got so much nostalgia.
Yeah, that's cool. I know when they start, I have so many t-shirts that have holes that make them, they're almost like lacking the properties of a
air
shirt.
conditioned.
Yeah. All right. So it seemed like Groundhog's Day for a while now because we've been stuck in these kind of pandemic routines. If it was really Groundhog's Day, what song would you have your alarm clock play?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Don't judge me. This is what it would be. The song I would play is Who Let the Dogs Out? Because every morning I go downstairs and I play, like, even if I don't want to, I start my day every day by going downstairs and play after I feed them. I play with my dogs for like 5 minutes, and it's just a moment to be the song is just absolutely silly, but like, it's just a moment to be and do something that makes no sense whatsoever. And it all, like, no matter how busy or stressed out I am, my dogs now demand it. And so I think that would be my alarm clock, just to remind me that I have to have a moment that makes no sense.
That's
just to do something for the sake
That's
of
good.
silly.
No, I mean, I have a Spotify playlist of all the songs, and it's pretty crazy. So this will be a good ad for that.
I mean, I wouldn't pick like a good song. I would just pick a song that reminds me to do something.
No, that's smart. And also, you don't want to sacrifice a song you really, really love and hate it.
Make you hate it.
All right. Coffee or tea or neither?
Coffee. Definitely coffee. I mean, if I had to have tea, there's actually a part in the book that's about coffee versus tea in my brain. And tea is for cold ice, maybe for living in the South or something. Like, coffee is for life. For getting you through the mornings, at least,
I always try to think.
Not that I have a strong opinion about this.
Well, I always try to think of episode titles, and I don't know if people ever wonder how I come up with them, but I just pick a quote that I like, and I almost feel like tea is for living in the South. That's like amazing. I don't think either one will end up being it, but anyway, that's good.
That's your creative process.
We'll see if it does it again. All right. And can you think of like a time that you laughed so hard you cried or couldn't stop, or just something that makes you do that, like when you think about it?
Oh my God, it's definitely my husband. And I have to say that, for better or for worse, and it's definitely for worse, I know this, like, our sense of humor have come to merge. We call ourselves astronauts of stupid because we just, like, I am like, I don't know, like the stereotypical 10-year-old boy on the inside when it comes to my sense of humor. It's just like very simple, like goofy cartoons or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I can remember a lot of things that were absolutely nothing, just like he said a word funny or wrong or something, and then he says something else, and we're just crying and can't stop laughing.
Nice. That's cool. And that's good to have that in your husband, too. I think that's really good.
Yes.
Okay, and who inspires you right now?
Who inspires me right now? You inspire me. I think you're amazing. Like, you spend your energy on so many things that matter to you. And I'm always like, wow, how does Rabia have all these F's? My daughter inspires me. She's young and saving the planet. I told you before, I used to say Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she inspires me right now, even though she doesn't exist. Because when I'm working really hard, I'm always like, what would her energy do? Like, she got this. She would not eat. She would work for like 20 hours and not sleep. But that's not my predisposition. My predisposition is like, who let the dogs out? Sometimes I need to dig a little deeper.
You have that who let the dogs out energy? That
yeah, exactly. Totally. That's my default.
But still, she's inspiring for sure.
Completely.
Well, thank you. That's really nice of you. And if people want to look you up or want to know more about you, and also, like, I guess your book will come out when? Not until next year, right?
I'm not sure. So next year. Yeah, January.
So anyway, if people are listening in 2022, that's you can find the book. But before then, what do you want people to look up?
You can look up chantelprat.com. That's my website. It's a little kind of a tiny bit old, but I think if you put my name in, so far, as far as I know, mostly you'll find relevant things. If you just Google my name, you'll probably find my lab website and my personal website, and something about, if you YouTube human brain to brain interface, you'll find the home video I made of connecting my husband to my colleague. And so any of those things would work.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Chantel, thank you so much for doing this. It was a lot of fun to chat with you in this way. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rabia. Good luck.
Thanks again for listening this week. You can find out more about the guest in the show notes and at rabiasaid.com. Joe Maffia created the music just for this podcast. Find him on Spotify. That's Joe, Maffia. And Rob Metke is responsible for our visual design. You can find him online by searching for Rob, Metke. Thanks, Rob. Let me know who you'd like to hear from or about your own experiences defining yourself outside of work. Follow at More Than Work Pod or send a message on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Or visit our website, morethanworkpod.com. Give us a follow on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a review if you like. Thanks for listening to More Than Work. While being kind to others, don't forget to be kind to yourself.